My mom laughed and said, "Your brother earned everything on his own, unlike you." I tried to brush it off, but the words stung in a way I couldn't ignore. For years, I'd watched my brother, Greg, bask in the spotlight while I quietly worked in the background. Every milestone he hit was met with praise and applause, while my accomplishments were left uncelebrated. And yet, what my family didn't know was that I'd been the one silently supporting Greg for years, sending him money when he was broke, covering his bills, and helping him start his business. But tonight, after hearing my mom dismiss me like that, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to sit back anymore. I wasn't going to let them ignore everything I'd done. The truth was about to come out, and it was time for my family to see the real me. Asterisk. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. As I sat there, the sting of my mother's words lingering. I had always known she favored Greg. It was nothing new. But tonight, something shifted. The realization that all my sacrifices, all the years of silently supporting him, meant nothing to her. It was too much to ignore any longer. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done being invisible. I walked out of that room and into the quiet of my bedroom, shutting the door behind me. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing. The weight of years spent hiding my actions, my resentment, my efforts, all of it felt like it was coming to a head. I didn't want to feel bitter. I didn't want to hold on to the anger, but it was hard not to. Greg had no idea what I had been doing for him. He had never once acknowledged the money I sent him each month, the countless times I bailed him out. My family had no clue what it had taken for me to balance my own career while supporting him from the shadows. And now, my mother's dismissal was the last straw. No more pretending. No more holding back. For years I'd been the one to sacrifice. I worked, harder than anyone in the family, constantly trying to prove that I deserved a seat at the table. I never expected praise. I never expected recognition. All I wanted was for my family to see that I was more than just the one who quietly held things together behind the scenes. But Greg? He was always the golden child. Every step he took seemed to be one covered in praise. Whether it was a new business venture, an academic achievement, or even a simple success at work, it was always Greg in the spotlight. I was used to it, of course. Growing up, he was the star of the family, always getting the accolades and the love. I learned to be okay with it. But deep down, it hurt. And over the years, that hurt had turned into a quiet resentment. A resentment that I buried, because it wasn't worth acknowledging. Until now. That night, when my mom laughed and said, "Your brother earned everything on his own, unlike you," I felt like I was suffocating. The words hit harder than they should have. They weren't just about me not getting the recognition I deserved. They were about all the years of silently supporting Greg, doing everything I could to help him achieve his dreams, while my own were put on hold. I needed to make them understand. It was time to break the silence. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the bank statements month after month, year after year. I had been sending money to Greg. Some months it was small amounts. Other months it was larger sums, when his business ventures hit rough patches. Every time I sent it, I told myself it was because he needed help, because family sticks together. But as I looked at the numbers now, I realized how much of my own life I had sacrificed to keep him afloat. Greg had no idea. He thought everything he'd built was his own doing, and in many ways, it was. But the truth was, I had been the invisible force behind it all, making sure he could keep going when things got tough, all the while pretending to be okay with being overlooked. As I stared at the bank statements, the reality of my situation hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the emotional toll it had taken. All those late nights spent juggling work, my business, and Greg's constant financial needs. All the hours I spent making sure my family didn't see how much I was doing for him. No one had asked. No one cared. But tonight, I wasn't going to hide it anymore. I threw my phone on the bed and walked over to the mirror. Who was I really? The woman who silently gave everything to support someone else's success while her own dreams were pushed aside? The woman who had never once asked for anything in return? I wasn't that woman anymore. Tonight was the turning point. It was time for my family to know the truth. I wasn't sure how to do it, but I knew I couldn't go on like this any longer. As much as I loved my family, as much as I wanted to keep supporting them, I needed to take back control. I wasn't invisible anymore. They were going to see the truth. They were going to understand the sacrifices I'd made, and if they didn't, that was no longer my problem. I grabbed my phone again, took a deep breath, and started drafting a message to Greg. I wasn't sure what to say at first. But in the end, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the years of silence, the years of pretending to be fine when I wasn't. It was time to tell him everything. And then, I'd tell my parents. The sound of the printer whirring echoed through the quiet of my apartment as I printed out another batch of bank statements. I spread them across my desk, the paper stacked high with months of transfers, receipts, and documentation. Each sheet felt like a small piece of the story I'd been keeping secret for far too long. It wasn't just the money, it was the years of effort, the countless sacrifices I'd made without a single word of acknowledgement from my family. I had been paying Greg's bills, covering his rent, and sending him money every month when things got tough. While my own life was filled with late nights at work and juggling multiple jobs to make ends meet, Greg's life seemed to flow effortlessly, supported by my invisible hand. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the papers spread out in front of me. The realization hit me like a wave. I had been the one holding everything together. I had always been the one in the background, quietly doing what needed to be done. While Greg was getting praised for his business achievements and celebrated for every little milestone, I was silently working, supporting him in every way I could. The money I sent was never a question. I just did it. But now, as I looked at the numbers and dates, I couldn't ignore the gravity of what I had done. There were wire transfers for thousands of dollars, often multiple times a month. I had paid for business expenses when Greg's startup hit a rough patch, sending him the money he needed without asking for anything in return. My family had no idea how many nights I stayed awake, wondering if I would have enough for my own bills, while also knowing Greg was relying on me to get through the tough times. The thought of it made my chest tighten. I had worked multiple jobs to fund him, sacrificed my own dreams and comfort, all while watching my family continue to lavish praise on him for the success I had quietly enabled. Every good job directed at Greg, every pat on the back from my parents, it all felt like a reminder of how invisible I was in their eyes. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was the emotional toll. I had been putting so much energy into supporting him that I had started losing myself. My career, my ambitions, everything I had worked for, took a back seat. All because I had been led to believe that family came first, and I had to sacrifice to make sure they were okay. And Greg? He had never once looked at what I was doing for him. To him, I was just there, and as far as my parents were concerned, I was the steady one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need to be celebrated. But now, as I looked at the evidence in front of me, I saw how much I had given up and how little recognition I had received in return. I picked up the phone and called a meeting with myself. My family needed to hear the truth. It was time for them to know what I had been doing for Greg and how it had impacted me. But I didn't know how to start. I couldn't just throw these documents in front of them and expect it to be enough. I had to make them understand the years of silent sacrifice I had made, the frustration that had built up over time, and how I'd finally reached the point where I couldn't do it anymore. The family dinner coming up seemed like the perfect opportunity. My parents had been asking me to come over, as they always did when Greg was home from his latest business trip. They'd be in their usual celebratory mood, touting Greg's latest success as if it were all his doing. I had been quiet for too long, but now I was determined to speak up. I began drafting my words in my mind, rehearsing what I would say when the time came. This wasn't about Greg. This wasn't about my mom's favoring him. This was about me finally taking control of my narrative. As the days went by, I grew more resolute. The documents in front of me no longer felt like a reminder of my sacrifices. They felt like the key to breaking free. I realized that the truth I was holding was powerful. It wasn't just the money that needed to be acknowledged. It was the years of being overlooked, of being silenced, of being forced into the background while my brother got all the glory. The family dinner would be my moment of reckoning. I would no longer be the sister who quietly disappeared into the background. It was time to be seen, to demand respect, and to take my place at the table. But before I could do that, I needed to make sure I was ready. I needed to be certain that I could say everything I wanted to without holding back. And when the time came, I knew my words would finally make my family see me for who I truly was. Dinner was always a family affair, but tonight felt different. The usual clinking of silverware, the hum of small talk, the laughter, all of it seemed distant. I couldn't shake the knot of tension in my stomach, the weight of what I was about to do. My hand gripped the edge of the table as I sat, listening to my mom and Greg chat about his latest business deal. Every word, every compliment, was like a reminder of the years I had been silenced. Tonight, I wouldn't stay silent anymore. I had prepared. I had gathered the bank statements, the wire transfer receipts, the evidence of everything I'd done for Greg. The money I had given him wasn't just about supporting his lifestyle, it was about the years of emotional labor I had quietly put in, trying to keep my family afloat while being overlooked. Tonight, they were going to see the truth. The conversation continued around me, but I knew it was time. My mom's voice carried through the room as she praised Greg once again. I looked at her face lighting up as she mentioned how proud she was of Greg's success. My heart ached, but I couldn't let that stop me. I had to speak. I stood up abruptly, silencing the room. My mom and Greg turned to look at me, startled. My hands shook, but my voice was steady. "I need to say something," I began, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been quiet for too long. I've let you both praise Greg for his success without acknowledging the sacrifices I've made for him to get here. I'm done being overlooked." The silence in the room was palpable. My mom's eyes widened as she instinctively reached for her glass of wine, but she didn't speak. Greg's face shifted from confusion to concern as he watched me, unsure of what he was coming. "I've been supporting Greg for years," I said, pulling the bank statements from my bag. "For the last 3 years, I've been sending him thousands of dollars each month. While you were praising him for his hard work, I was the one quietly making sure his business didn't fail. I was the one keeping him afloat when things got tough." I laid the documents out on the table, each page a silent testament to the years I had spent helping Greg without ever asking for anything in return. My mom's face reddened as she glanced at the papers, but she quickly tried to downplay it. "You know how hard things can get when you start a business," she said, her voice sounding nervous now. "Greg has had his struggles, but you've always been fine, Cora. You've always been the strong one." "That's the problem, Mom," I snapped, my frustration bubbling over. "I've always been the strong one, but you've never once stopped to ask how I'm doing, how much I've sacrificed to help him. All these years, I've been quietly supporting him while you've been celebrating his success, never knowing the truth." Greg sat frozen, staring at the papers. His expression was a mix of shock and guilt. I didn't know," he stammered, looking at me, clearly stunned. "I had no idea you were doing all that for me." "Well, of course you didn't," I said, my voice sharp, "because you never asked. You just accepted everything and never once thought about where it was coming from." My mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Cora, you don't need to make this into something bigger than it is," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Greg has worked hard, and so have you. We've always been proud of you both." But her words fell flat. I could feel the weight of all those years of neglect, all the silent sacrifices, crashing down on me. This wasn't about a few $1,000 or some misplaced praise. This was about the years of being invisible in my own family. "No, Mom," I said, cutting her off. "You've always been proud of Greg, and I've been okay with that for a while, but not anymore. I've worked harder than anyone in this family, and I've done it all while being ignored. I'm done being the invisible sister. I'm done being the one who is expected to just quietly keep everything together." The room was heavy with silence. Greg's guilt was written all over his face, but he didn't say anything more. He seemed to realize that there was nothing he could say to fix this. My mom, too, sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my emotions start to lift. "I'm not doing this for you, Greg," I said. "I'm doing this for me. I've spent too long being overlooked, being silent. I'm done waiting for your validation. I'm done waiting for your approval, Mom." For the first time in my life, I wasn't holding back. I wasn't waiting for them to notice me, to praise me, to acknowledge what I had done. I had been carrying so much for so long, but now, it was out in the open. I stood up, my hands shaking, but my heart finally feeling lighter. "I'm not asking for anything from you anymore, but I'm not going to stay in the background anymore. I have worked hard, I have sacrificed, and I will no longer let anyone ignore that." The silence in the room was suffocating after my confrontation. I could feel the weight of the truth settling in, like a fog that neither Greg nor my mother knew how to navigate. Greg was staring at the documents I had laid out, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. It was clear he hadn't realized the full extent of what I had been doing for him all these years. He was the first to break the silence, though his voice was shaky. "Cora, I didn't know you were doing all of this for me." His words were sincere, but there was an underlying tone of guilt that made them feel hollow. I crossed my arms, feeling the anger that had built up over the years surge again. Of course you didn't know, Greg. You never asked. You just kept taking. Greg flinched, as though my words had physically struck him. He stood up from the table, running his hands through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. I had no idea. I just thought you were. You were fine, Cora. You've always been fine. I shook my head, the frustration in my chest tight and raw. I've always been fine? Is that what you think? You think I've just been sitting here quietly while you get all the praise? You think everything just falls into place for me too? My voice rose, and I could feel the sting of tears forming, but I fought them back. I wasn't going to let him off easy. Not this time. Greg took a step toward me, his expression filled with guilt. Cora, I'm sorry. I don't know how to make it right, but I'm sorry. His apology was almost unbearable to hear. It felt empty, a poor attempt to fix something that went far deeper than a few words could ever repair. You don't need to apologize, Greg, I said firmly, my voice cold now. I'm not looking for your pity. His face faltered, and he seemed to shrink back, his guilt gnawing at him, but I wasn't going to back down now. You don't get it, do you? I continued. I didn't do this for you to feel sorry for me. I did it because I believed in you, because I thought that somehow, if I helped you, if I kept you afloat, someone would notice. Someone would see how much I was sacrificing. But you never saw it. You just accepted it as if it was owed to you. Greg opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand to stop him. And don't tell me that I've always been strong, that I've always been the one to hold everything together. Yes, I have been. But at what cost, Greg? At what cost? I let out a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't about making Greg feel bad. This was about setting things right. Your success, all of it, I paused, making sure he was looking at me, is not just your own. You've had privilege. You've had me behind the scenes, holding you up, making sure everything went smoothly while I went unnoticed. And now you need to understand that. Greg looked at me, his eyes clouded with guilt and confusion. I never saw it like that, Cora. I didn't know. Well, now you do, I said, my voice firm. And now you need to understand that I'm not going to keep doing this. I'm not going to keep enabling you. I'm not going to keep sacrificing for your success while I'm ignored. His face twisted in frustration. But I never asked you to do this for me. I never asked for your help. I stood up from the table, facing him directly. No, you didn't. But you accepted it, Greg. You accepted it because you were too focused on your own success to see what was happening around you. And I'm done with that. I've been done for a while, actually. You don't get to treat me like a safety net anymore. I've had enough. The room was still, Greg's gaze searching mine for any sign that I was joking. But I wasn't. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't about him feeling bad or offering some half-hearted apology. This was about me taking control of my life and setting boundaries for myself. I'm done playing the role of the invisible sister who quietly keeps everything together, I said, my voice resolute. From now on, I'm living for myself. I will not keep holding you up while I'm left behind. I've done enough for you, Greg, and it's time for you to start taking responsibility for your own life. He stood in silence for a moment, processing my words. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer than before. Cora, I get it, and I'm sorry. I never meant to take you for granted. I'll make it right, I promise. I looked at him, no longer feeling the need for reassurance. I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm just asking you to see me for once, to acknowledge what I've done, not just for you, but for myself. And from here on out, I need you to respect the boundaries I'm setting. Greg nodded slowly, his expression shifting from guilt to a reluctant understanding. I'll respect that, he said quietly. I will. My mom sat across from me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes, once full of pride for Greg, were now clouded with something else, guilt. She wasn't looking at me directly anymore, as if the weight of my words had cracked through the protective layers she'd built around her denial. She kept glancing at Greg, who sat silently beside her, his face flushed with the realization that he had taken me for granted all these years. It wasn't just the revelation that had stunned them. It was the years of invisible labor I'd quietly carried, the months of unpaid emotional and financial support I'd given, and the fact that none of them had noticed. Not until tonight. I didn't know. My mom finally spoke, her voice shaky. She was looking down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. I had no idea you were doing all of this for Greg. Her words felt like an apology, but they also felt empty. She didn't really know. She hadn't asked. She hadn't ever stopped to notice me, not in the way she'd always noticed Greg. For a long time, I had convinced myself that it wasn't her fault, that she just didn't see what was happening. But now, it was clear. She didn't see, and she didn't ask. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Of course you didn't. Nobody did. Greg shifted uncomfortably next to her, his face still flushed. He didn't know how to respond. The guilt was written all over his face. He had been oblivious for years, and now, the weight of it was slowly sinking in. I don't know what to say, Cora, Greg stammered, his voice small. I had no idea you were carrying all of that. I looked at him, my heart aching, but there was no room for sympathy right now. It's not just about the money, Greg, I said, my voice steady. It's about the fact that none of you ever noticed how much I was doing. You just expected it, and I've been fine with that, or at least, I pretended to be. But I'm done pretending. My mom's face tightened, and she let out a small, frustrated breath. I never meant for you to feel this way, Cora, she whispered. I just thought you were the one who was always fine. You always took care of everything. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She wasn't malicious, but her blind spot for me had hurt more than I realized. She had always assumed I could handle everything, that I would always be there, quietly making sure things didn't fall apart. But no one ever asked how I was doing, how much I was sacrificing. My father, who had been eerily silent through the entire conversation, finally spoke. His voice was low, but there was an edge of something I hadn't heard from him before. Regret, perhaps. I never realized. I didn't know it had gone this far, Cora. I thought Greg was handling things on his own. I thought you were managing fine. My father's acknowledgement wasn't much, but it was something. After years of hearing him speak in passing, making casual comments about my stability, it was the first time I heard him truly see me for who I was. And in a way, that moment of recognition was both empowering and painful. I nodded, but I wasn't sure how to feel about his words. It wasn't an apology, it was more like the soft realization that, once again, I had been invisible to him. I had always been the one who didn't need help, who kept everything together. And maybe, just maybe, that had been my biggest mistake, pretending I didn't need anything from anyone. I've been fine, I said, my voice even, but only because I've had to be, and I'm not going to keep doing this anymore. There was a heavy silence after that, one that stretched long enough for me to wonder if they even understood what I was saying. Did they get it? Did they really see how much I had given up for them? My mom reached across the table toward me, her hand trembling slightly. Cora, she began, her voice laced with sorrow. I'm sorry. I didn't see how much you were carrying. I didn't mean to take you for granted. Her apology, though heartfelt, didn't feel like enough. It was a start, but it wasn't a resolution. The truth was, this wasn't just about me needing an apology. It was about me needing to change the way my family saw me and the way I saw myself in this family. I couldn't be the one who kept holding everyone up anymore. I'm done being the strong one, Mom, I said, my voice firm. I've been strong for too long, and it's cost me more than you realize. My dad didn't say anything else, but I could see the wheels turning in his head, a rare sign of recognition that, maybe, things weren't as simple as they'd seemed. The dynamic was changing, slowly, painfully, but it was changing. The days following the family dinner were quiet, but they were not without change. I had expected a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, regret, or even more dismissive comments from my family, but instead, there was a strange sense of clarity settling in my mind, like I had just taken the first real breath in years. For so long, I had been wrapped up in the lives of my family, especially Greg's. I had been the silent supporter, the one who quietly sacrificed so that everyone else could thrive. But now, I was seeing things differently. I wasn't just an afterthought. I wasn't just the reliable one, expected to hold everything together, while others received the applause. I had been too focused on being what everyone needed me to be, and had neglected the most important person in my life, myself. After years of feeling invisible, I realized that I didn't need my family's approval. It wasn't easy to admit, but I was finally starting to understand that. My worth was not tied to their recognition. I had spent so much of my life seeking validation from them, waiting for their praise, for their acknowledgement. But now, I knew better. I was capable of creating my own worth, and that realization was nothing short of liberating. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk, a fresh notebook in front of me. My mind raced with new possibilities. The last few months had opened my eyes to the fact that I had been playing small for too long. I had focused on supporting Greg, on managing my family's expectations, and on making sure everyone else was okay. But what about me? What about my own dreams? I pulled my laptop closer and opened a blank document. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't writing a to-do list to appease someone else. I was writing goals for myself. I wanted more than just a career that kept me afloat. I wanted a career that fulfilled me, challenged me, and allowed me to grow. I wanted to feel like I was succeeding for my own sake, not because I had helped everyone else succeed. I started listing professional goals that had nothing to do with Greg or my family's expectations. I wanted to take on more ambitious projects, step out of my comfort zone, and start positioning myself as a leader in my field. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to recognize my worth anymore. I was going to make it happen on my own. It felt strange at first, to actually consider what I wanted for myself. For so long, my existence had been defined by my family's needs, but as I reflected on my past, I realized how much of me I had sacrificed along the way. The thought of leaving behind the approval I had craved for so long didn't scare me like it used to. Instead, I felt lighter, freer. I had spent years trying to please people who would never truly understand the extent of what I had done. But now, I was building a life that was all mine. The more I focused on my own path, the more my confidence grew. I started taking on more challenging projects at work, things that pushed me to think bigger and act bolder. I wasn't afraid to speak up in meetings anymore. I wasn't afraid to take risks. The woman who had once been silent, who had held herself back, was stepping forward, and it felt incredible. With the focus on my career, I also made a conscious decision to take better care of myself emotionally and mentally. I had neglected my well-being for far too long. I began setting boundaries, not just with my family, but with everyone. I said no more often, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I needed to preserve my energy for the things that truly mattered: my career, my personal growth, and my peace of mind. I started taking time for myself: long walks in the evenings, weekend getaways to places I had always wanted to visit, and even finding a therapist to help me process the years of emotional weight I had been carrying. I realized that I couldn't continue to give without replenishing myself first. A few weeks later, I stood in front of a packed room for a presentation. My heart pounded in my chest. But this time, the nerves felt different. They weren't paralyzing, they were energizing. I was no longer afraid to be seen. I had spent too many years shrinking into the background, allowing others to take center stage. But now, I was ready to claim my place. As I spoke, I could feel the change in me. The woman on that stage wasn't the same woman who had quietly supported Greg. She wasn't the same woman who had sought approval at the expense of her own happiness. This woman was confident, empowered, and unapologetically herself. By the end of the presentation, the room erupted in applause. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need anyone to tell me I had done a good job. I already knew. The weeks following my confrontation with my family felt like a slow burn, an ongoing process of trying to rebuild what had been broken. The shift in our dynamics was palpable, but the road ahead still felt long. I had spoken my truth, exposed the years of silent sacrifice, and demanded recognition for my efforts. Yet, even after everything, I knew the real work wasn't in the confrontation, it was in the healing that had to follow. It wasn't easy. My mother, Kate, and Greg both seemed to be grappling with the aftermath, trying to understand the weight of their actions or their lack of action and how deeply it had impacted me. But the most important thing I realized during this time was that I wasn't going to rush them. I had spent years trying to get their approval, to make them see me, to make them care. But now, the tables had turned. This time, I was in control of my own narrative. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I needed moving forward. I realized that I wasn't going to just return to the same old patterns where I silently kept the family together while Greg and Mom got all the attention. I had been doing that for too long. I had spent enough time being the reliable, always there sister. Now, I had to make sure that my relationships were based on mutual respect, not obligation. One Sunday afternoon, Mom called me. Her voice was softer than usual, and for the first time in a long time, there was no underlying edge of judgment or expectation. "Can we talk, Cora?" she asked, her tone hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about everything you said, about the way I treated you." I sighed, the weight of the conversation looming over me, but I agreed. When we met at a coffee shop the next day, I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't try to justify her actions. She didn't give me excuses. She simply listened. "I've always been so proud of Greg," she said, staring down at her coffee cup. "I've always thought you were strong enough to handle things on your own, but I never realized how much I was neglecting you in the process. I'm sorry, Cora." Her apology wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time, I felt like she was seeing me not just as her daughter, but as an individual with my own needs, dreams, and worth. "I appreciate you saying that, Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "But I need to be clear, this isn't about needing you to fix everything. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I've been doing that for too long. This is about me finding my own way, and I need you to respect that." She nodded, looking up at me with a mixture of pride and sorrow in her eyes. "I do respect that, Cora. I'm trying to learn how to be the mother you really need. I don't want to keep falling back into old habits." That was the moment when I realized how much had shifted, not just in me, but in her too. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was acknowledging her mistakes, which was more than I had expected. The truth was, the healing wouldn't happen overnight, but this conversation was a step in the right direction. The conversation with Greg came a few days later. He had been quieter than usual, avoiding the direct confrontation that I had expected, but I had no intention of letting him slip into the same old patterns. I needed to know if he was willing to change, not just for me, but for himself. We sat in my living room, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I could tell he was struggling, trying to find the right words to say. "I don't know what to say, Cora," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I honestly didn't know. I didn't realize how much you had been doing for me. I'm sorry. I don't know how to make it right, but I want to." I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eyes. "Greg, I don't need you to make it right. I just need you to understand that your success wasn't just yours alone. You've had help, and it's important that you recognize that. The privilege you've had, the support I've quietly given you needs to be acknowledged. And it can't just be in words. It has to show in your actions from now on." He looked down, his guilt apparent. "I know. I've been selfish, and I've taken you for granted. But I want to do better. I don't want to keep letting you down." I nodded, accepting his apology, but setting clear boundaries. "I'm glad to hear that, Greg. But from here on out, I need you to step up, not just in how you treat me, but in how you treat others. I'm not your safety net anymore." The words stung, but I meant them. I had been the one to always pick up the slack, always make sure everyone else was okay. Now, it was his turn. The family dynamic was shifting, but it was a slow process, and this time, I wasn't going to let it fall back into old patterns. The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds of my apartment, casting warm, golden light across the room. As I stood by the window, looking out at the city below, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The chaos of the last few months, the confrontations, the realizations, and the long overdue changes, all seemed to have settled into something more peaceful. My life, once tangled with family expectations and unspoken sacrifices, now felt like a fresh canvas, one that I was ready to fill with my own choices, my own dreams, and my own path forward. For years, I had been defined by my family's expectations, by the roles they assigned to me. I was the strong, dependable one, the one who quietly held everything together while everyone else got the recognition and praise. I had done what was expected of me, hoping that someday, somehow, I would be seen, that my efforts would be acknowledged. But I had learned the hard way that waiting for that recognition was a fool's game. And now, I realized that my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's approval, especially not my family's. With that understanding, I embraced a new sense of freedom. I was no longer bound by the need for validation from my mother or Greg. The weight of their neglect, the constant comparison to Greg, and the feeling of being invisible had finally been lifted. No longer would I be the one sacrificing my time, my dreams, and my energy just to keep things running for them. It was time to move forward on my own terms. For the first time in years, I felt at peace with the decisions I had made. I had let go of the resentment that had been holding me back. I wasn't angry anymore, I was free, and with that freedom came a newfound sense of strength. My power didn't come from appeasing my family or fulfilling their expectations. It came from within. It came from realizing that I was enough, just as I was, without needing anyone else's validation. In the months that followed, My career took on new meaning. I pushed myself harder than ever before, taking on projects I had once shied away from. I didn't hold back. If there was a challenge, I tackled it head-on, no longer afraid of failure or of making mistakes. With each new challenge I faced, I felt more confident in my abilities. I wasn't just working to make a living or to support others. I was working for myself, building something that I could be proud of, something that reflected who I truly was. I began to expand my network, attending industry events and meeting people who were as passionate about their work as I was. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a leader. I found myself in rooms where I could contribute, where my voice mattered. And the best part? I didn't need anyone's approval to feel proud of what I was achieving. One day, as I sat in a meeting with potential investors for a new project, I looked around the room, and for the first time, I realized how far I had come. Not just in my career, but in my life. I wasn't that woman who had waited for approval anymore. I wasn't the one who quietly supported everyone else while neglecting my own needs. I had taken control of my own story, and it was mine to tell. I could feel the weight of my family's expectations still lingering in the back of my mind, but it was different now. I no longer felt the need to live up to them. I didn't need their validation to know that I was doing the right thing. I was proud of who I had become and the work I had done. The emotional weight I had carried for so long of being unseen, of being the silent helper, had been released. I was free. That evening, as I walked through the city streets after work, I felt lighter than I had in years. The uncertainty that had once clouded my future was gone, replaced by excitement and possibility. I had a whole new chapter ahead of me, one that I could write however I wanted. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't writing it for anyone else but me. I thought about the family dinners, the moments when I had quietly sacrificed, hoping that someone would notice. I thought about Greg and Mom, how the dynamics had changed, how I had set boundaries, and how they were beginning to see me in a new light. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and progress was enough. As I stepped into my apartment, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't rushing toward anything anymore. I was letting life unfold at its own pace, knowing that I was exactly where I needed to be. The future was bright, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I didn't need my family's approval. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I had already done the work. I had built my success from the ground up. And now, I was finally free to live it, to enjoy it, and to continue building my future, one decision at a time. I smiled to myself, ready for whatever came next. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to conquer.